Alright, welcome back everybody. So, last episode, we started the Selector class. We basically got all our declarations out. So now we just have to define these. So, what we're going to do, let's just get these all started. Alright, so we got all these functions started. So if you've noticed, because it's a template class, it has to be done in the same file, or a .h file, or you can do it into a .inl file or something like that, but it has to be, you would have to include it in the file here at the bottom. So let's get into defining this. So for our constructor, so we actually have to change our constructor signature first. We're going to need a few things that we didn't put in. So what's our constructor going to need? Well, we want to send in the console reference. We're going to want to send in that keyboard. For this constructor, we're going to want to send in both of our functions. Alright, what else are we going to need? Let's put this down on a different line. And then we're going to need our data. And then we're going to need our parameters. And we'll send that in as default. Alright, so now we actually have to copy this. We don't want to do that there. And then we initialize. So, console. And keyboard. And then on selection. And on draw item. I think that's what I call it. Item and data and params all right. Oh, and then we also want to show our cursor, and B, show cursor. We'll make that true. So now we want to initialize the number of rows. So mRows is equal to stdcln of m data size divided by the number of columns. So we also want to check to see if the number of columns are equal to 0. So we don't want to be dividing by 0. So to params dot columns is equal to 0. send back 1, else send back params.const. So this is a ternary operator here. It's basically an if statement that's checking between two. If this is true, we're sending back 1. If this is false, we send back the number of columns. And then this, let's just do a little check to see if rows is less than 1. If m rows is less than 1, m rows is equal to 1. Alright, so that's our constructor. So what we actually want to do now is create another constructor. So this one is taking in our two function pointers. So let's come up here and create another selector constructor. Basically the same. That doesn't take in these two functions. I guess we could put in the selector params as well. Select params default. Let's create this. Now let's go down here. So now this will actually take in the other selector constructor as its initializer. And console, keyboard, and then because params is after, we need to put in our functions. So what we're going to actually want to do now here is we want to get these two functions here. So we're going to need to use lambdas for that. So after the keyboard, actually let's bring this down. Keyboard, and then we're going to want to get, we want to capture this int index int, oh not int, sorry, std vector t data, and this is going to call our selector on selection index data. I don't like that it did that. So we're still missing something. Yeah. So let's bring this over here. I actually don't. Yeah, that's. Sorry. This here. Let's get rid of that for now. And then we're just gonna copy this because we need the same thing. But we need to change this a bit. This needs to be int x, int y, and then just t item. And then we want on draw. Draw. Oh no, it's not even called that. It's called draw item. Draw item. X. Y. Data. Alright. So now we need the data and the params. Cool. What the bloody params. I think that should work. Well, we'll try it and see. So basically, this constructor is using this constructor here, where it already initialized all of our members. So the onDraw, onDraw. The onDraw is now taking in this here. Ah, there's our problem. Right there. So we're taking in this lambda, which is an anonymous function, but we're actually taking in this object and using this signature with this function here. And it's calling the member function on selection. Also, the beauty of doing this way is anything we do in here will automatically be done. So if we don't add in our functions here, it'll automatically call this one and initialize everything for us. Okay, so in our destructor, we don't have to do anything. So process inputs is basically we're going to be using our keyboard to call these functions and do move our selector. We have our keyboard, we just go if and keyboard is just pressed, key W. You can use any key here you want. I'm going to use the WASD keys. And then just let's copy these 4 times. Let's do 5 times. Else. So W, we want to call move up. Move left, I'm going to want to call it A. Oops. This is D. And this is our on action. That's it for our process inputs. So it's basically looking, oh, sorry, let's change this to space. You can change that to enter or any button that you find convenient. So what this is doing is it's checking to see if any of these buttons are pressed. It only wants to see one press at a time. So if you press any of these, it'll call these functions. Okay, so now let's do these move up, move down functions, our move functions. So these are going to be using std min and std max. The problem with this is we're using the Windows, and Windows defines min and max. So we don't want it to take over or our min and max. So what we need to do is go into here. This is what I like to do. Go into properties, preprocessor definitions. And you want to add in, so right here, no min max. We want to add that in as a preprocessor definition, but you want to put it on both. So either release or debug. So if you see no min max here, you want to add that in, or you can define it at the top. Sorry, you can define it up here. Basically just define no min max. That's it. And that'll do the same thing for you because we want to use our std min max for this. So these are pretty straightforward. We're going to want to go m params dot current y, because we're moving up. Current y is equal to std max m params dot current y minus 1 or 0. So if it goes beyond 0, it'll basically clamp it here to 0. So we're going to want to copy these as well because we're minusing 1. So if it goes to -1, it'll give us 0. So move down is the opposite. We need to go min m params current y plus 1, and we want to get the rows here. So m rows minus 1. So basically that's because your y's is your rows. Think of the grid as rows are down for your y, columns are across for your x. So let's paste this in again, but now we're going to want to change this to x. X. So the same idea. If it gets to 0, it's going to be 0. If it gets beyond that, it's going to be 0 again. We could put something in to have it wrap around, but we'll look at that later. Let's just get the basic functionality in first. Okay. So this one, x +1. Make sure we change this to x as well. That's the problem with copy and paste. Sometimes you forget. And then it's params dot columns -1. All right, so on action is pretty straightforward as well. So for on action, we're just going to want to get the index, the current index that our cursor is on, or that we're pointing at, and then we're going to call the on selection function for that index. Okay, so let's go int get index, and then we're going to want to call that function pointer m on selection, and then we're going to put, oh that's funny, and then we're going to send our data with that. So let's go down here to draw item. Now the thing with drawing the item, since we're using a template here, we might not be able to just directly draw this. So in our default draw item, we're not going to want to allow, like, so if this is int, well, we don't have a default write for int, and we don't want to have to write every default that we think it could be. So we don't want to do int float. We don't want to have to do all those. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check to see if the type is a W string, and then we're going to draw. If not, we're going to send a message to the console, not necessarily to the log. We're going to send an error message saying that they have to override this function if they're going to use that particular data type. So we can do that with this. So check to see if the type is W string, and we can do that with if const expr std is same t, is it the same as std W string? Check the value. If it is, we're going to want to write write x y item. Because we know this is a W string here, we'll just let it draw, and then we can return from this function. If not, we're going to want to get the type and let user know to override. So std string type. We're not putting it in our buffer. This is going to go to your output stream. We want to get the type ID of that item. We want to get the name of that. And then we're going to do our trpg error. Let them know what the type is that they put in, so they have an idea of where, because you could have many selectors, so they may not all have the same type. So we're putting in the type in the error so they know. They'll know right away because they probably won't see anything being drawn. However, this is what we'll do. Needs to be a W string. Please create the draw item function to override. Cool. So same with on selection. We're going to want this function to be overridden as well, because think about it. If you have different indexes with different things that you want to do, so say we want to select start game, well, that is going to be different, or you want to go into a menu, or you want to, so these are always going to be different regardless. So the person needs to override this. So all we're going to do now is just write the index to the screen. That's all I want to do. So they at least know that they're on the right index, just for testing purposes. And console.write. And we'll just put this at 50, 20, and we will write the index So basically it's just writing the index. Let's put a little comment here. Please, this function should be overridden. Okay, so now for the juicy one. Draw is a bit more in depth than the other ones. So let's start with the draw function. The first thing we're going to want to do is check to see if we even have any data to draw. Because if there's no data, we don't want to draw, so we'll just leave the function right away. So if there is no data, nothing to draw. So we just check to see if it's empty. If it's empty, we're just going to return. We're just going to leave that function. There's no need to continue. And now let's get our item index. So this is just where we are when our drawing. What index are we drawing right now? We're going to start at 0, and this will be incremented inside the program as we draw the others. Int x is equal to params dot x, m params. Y will do the same thing. The row height. If you remember, our row height is equal to our Y spacing. And then we're going to want to get spacing X. And then we're also going to want to have int max data is equal to m data.size. Okay, so basically we're going to want to loop over all of our rows and all of our columns and draw based on the index that we're currently at. So we're going to need 2 for loops. For int I equals 0, I is less than num rows, I plus plus. So we're looping over the rows, and now let's loop over the columns. J is less than m params columns, J plus plus. Okay. If our current I and our current J are equal to, our current X and our current I are equal to the current J, we're going to want to draw the cursor because that's where it is, because we're monitoring where our cursor is. So let's do a check. So if I is equal to m dot params current Y and J is equal to m dot params dot current X, this is where we draw the cursor, or we deal with the cursor here. So we also want to check to see if we're even wanting to show the cursor. So if we don't want to show the cursor, we're going to want to skip everything else. So if we don't want to show the cursor, we're going to want to skip here. So clear the cursor. Okay, so m console, because everything is getting written to the console, remember that. X, Y, and then it would just be, a space. A space is basically a clearing. Now I have done a little bit of this, so we are going to want to subtract from the X here, but we need to do a check, because if we're at 0, we don't want to subtract from it to 0. So if it's equal to 0, 0, or 2. So if our X is equal to 0, subtract nothing. If anything beyond that, we're going to subtract 2. Okay. So So we basically, now we can draw the cursor. So if we want to show the cursor, we want to draw the cursor. Basically, we're doing the same thing here. However, we are drawing the cursor now. And we can give it a color. I'm going to give it the color of red, just so it stands out. There is some clearing and stuff that we have to do here in order to make sure that as we move our cursor, we're clearing above it and behind it, or wherever, whichever direction we're moving. But we'll handle that after, right now. So now we need to basically call our draw item. So we were drawing the cursor, so now we got to draw the item, and then also move our index over. So we want to check if our item index is less than max data. If our index is beyond data, remember our max data is based on our data size. So if it's beyond our max data, we don't want to go into here because we're going to be trying to get the index at that location. And we don't want to try to grab the index of the vector that's beyond the size. So let's get that item is equal to mData at item index. Now we're going to want to call the mDraw item function x, y, and item. This is where we call that function pointer, or it's not a function pointer, the std function. Now we're going to want to move over our x for the next draw, which is just plus equal, x is plus equal spacing x. And then we're also going to want to increase or increment our index. What index are we actually pointing at now? Okay. So then we also now, this deals with our columns. Now we have to deal with our rows. So now we're going to want to increase our row plus by the row height. And then we're going to want to increase our, and then set our x because to the x again here. Because we're basically want to reset it back. That's why we used a variable here, because we don't want to change this. We want to reset it back here because we've already gone through our columns. So look at it, think of it like you're going through your columns. Once you get to the end, you're going to want to go back here, but down one. Back to the beginning, but down one row. So that's what we're doing here. So y plus equals row height. And then x is, we're basically resetting x back to x. Okay, that should be it for the draw function. That should be it for now. There's some other things we're going to have to put in later, but we don't need it right now, so I'll look at that after. So let's just run it, see if I have any errors. We're probably not going to have any errors because we didn't create an object of the selector yet. Yeah, so it worked fine. So now let's add an object of this to our game state and just do a simple selection. So let's go to our game state and include selector. And we're going to create a selector here. We're not going to give it a type, so it should default to W string. We're just going to call this mSelector. This is temporary. We're not actually, we don't really care about this one right now. We're going to change it later. So let's go to games, let's initialize this. So game state, see here, it's like, oh, where's our selector? So let's go here, selector. I want to create a new selector. We need a console, keyboard. Oh, look at me being all silly. I didn't send a console into the game state? No way. Okay, so let's fix that right now. console is actually basically the most important thing. And we're going to want to include our console. Okay. So selector, let's go back to our constructor just to see what we need. So we're just going to be doing this one right here. And because we already set our selector params up here, we don't even have to put that in, we'll just get default values. And our data, all we have to do is put in our data now. Console. Before that, let's fix this. Let's just be consistent. Leave that like that. Console and data. All we need is data now, so we need to do a vector. Let's just start. Settings. Exit. Whoops. There we go. No errors. Good. Okay. So now with process inputs, we can go M selector, process inputs, and draw. M selector, draw. And we gotta go M console, draw as well. And in here, we might as well clear our buffer on enter. And we can do it on exit as well. Let's get rid of that. We can get rid of the update. That's good for now. What I did notice here actually is we're throwing an error if we try to clear this because we're ending up clearing a space, trying to set color to a space. So let's actually just get rid of this in our clear buffer. We don't need that. And I think this should work. Let's run it and see. And it didn't. Why? M data. Oh, that'll do. So Control H, open up our replace in our current document, and we don't want to do that. We want to do this. Copy this. Alt A. There was only one other occurrence. No? What other problems do we have here? Really? Oh, duh. Yep, kind of figured this would happen. So let's handle this first, because we know what the problem is. And that's in game, I believe we're calling game state. Yes, we are. And we gotta send in our console now. Cool. We knew that was gonna happen. Data cannot be implicitly captured. It doesn't like us. And it's only for both of these functions here. Oh, silly me. Yeah, it was item. I was okay, so this should work now. You guys may have caught that earlier. Good for you. If not, that should work now. Yay! So our selector is working. If you see, it's not deleting. We'll get into that. Let's get rid of that hello world as well. Whoops. Okay, so we got some bugs, but we'll get into fixing those. So where was that? Where are we writing that hello world? Right here. We don't need this anymore because we know that works. Back to the selector. Actually, let's run it real quick so you can see. So there we go. See, start, settings, exit, and it goes down. You can't see it going back up. Index 0, index 1, index 2. See, so it's working. So now we're going to want to clear these spots as we move. So let's do that right away. That's what I was talking about in the draw function. So if we want to show the cursor, we're going to want to clear everything. So it's the same idea. We want to reset the areas behind the cursor as it moves. If I is not equal to 0. Yeah, so basically we want this. However, we want to, instead of it just being y, we want to minus the row height. And then that's just one. So we have to do a few different ones as well. So m console.write. Now there's probably a cleaner way to do this, but this is the way that I figured out for now. And we'll probably get it better as we go. Plus row height, 2 more, plus, sorry, minus, sorry, this can be just y, minus spacing x, plus spacing x. So basically we're clearing everything around the cursor. Oh, that's why. Cool. Let's run it, see if it works. Yay! So our selector is working. Index 0, index 1, index 2. Cool. So our selector class, that's it for the selector class. Now this is just the first default implementation of it. In the next episode, we will show you how to override the selector class. All right, thank you. See you next time. All right, so actually before we finish the video here, we should push our changes to GitHub. So what I actually like is using GitHub Desktop. If you've never seen GitHub Desktop before, it is a nice way to see your changes side by side before you commit. So we can see our different changes, and you can make different commits a lot easier. It's a nice UI interface. If you want to get GitHub Desktop, just go right here. The link will be in the description. It's for using Windows. If you're not using Windows, or if you don't like use the GUI version with this GitHub Desktop, you can Just do it in the command line. So open up your project tree, where it is, or your file, and just go up into the top, type CMD. That will bring you directly into the directory. And you just go git status. Make sure you have git already installed, so we can see that we have different modified, and then you can just go on from there and do that. However, we're not going to do it here. We're actually going to do it here. So there's a few different changes. So what does this show? This shows that we added the selector. This shows that we changed our preprocessor definition. So we're going to actually take, on our first commit, we only want to commit the selector. So implemented selector class and add no min max pre-process definition. Okay, then commit. So we have one commit, and then now let's do this one here. What do we do here? So we removed the set text color because we don't want to try to set the color to an empty space. Removed set text color from clear buffer function. This was throwing an error because trying to color a space. Commit. Now these ones, we can just add all of these in. All we did was make it so we can use the selector in the game state, but we also threw in the console to the game state. Added new selector to game state as test. Cool. Commit to main. Now you can publish from here, or we can actually go back to here, CMD, git status. So there's nothing to commit because everything is already committed. So we can actually push git push origin main. Oh no. So we can just go git pull origin main. Just because we changed our readme file, but we didn't pull it before doing that. We should do that at the beginning. It saves time. And then I'll git push origin main. Awesome. So everything got pushed. Let's go back to GitHub Desktop. Cool. It should already, we might have to set this up. Yeah, your current blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we have to set this up. So we just pushed. Let's just make sure everything is there. Source, selector. All right, everything is there and good to go. Okay guys, see you next video.